in the chat last week, I guess Judy had said that Co-Housing Hamilton and the other co-housing projects in progress in Toronto, Kawartha area, and Sudbury were the first co-housing in the province of Ontario. And it was pointed out in the chat that another co-housing has existed for 20 years, more than 20 years. And so here is a site, a picture from their website. The website is wholevillage.ca, Whole Village Co-Housing and Farming Cooperative, or not, it's wholevillage.org. And they call themselves an eco-village in Caledon Hills. They're in Alton, Ontario, not too far from Orangeville. And they are built on a farm. So they're providing housing, but also the business of the farm. So you might want to look that up. Next slide. And then we have comments from the chat last time. Two of the comments have to do with social connections. One person said, I'm a very private person, but I love that my neighbors check on me. And that's what planning housing and community of one sort or another guarantees you, that you have neighbors checking on you. Many people do in naturally occurring neighborhoods, but more and more neighbors don't know each other anymore. On the street, the houses were built when there were families and small kids. Everybody got to know each other, and more people, as the ownership changes to other generations, more and more people don't get to know their neighbors. It matters that you matter. Whether you live by yourself or with a family, you need other people to make you feel that you matter. I think that's an important comment, that we all need to feel we belong, to feel that we're known in some way, not totally forgotten. And then there were two questions that seemed to be the most important in the chat. One was, how does co-housing manage covering all the decision-making and operational tasks? And there was some discussion last week about what if people don't choose to take part. And I'm suggesting some possibilities. First of all the members of co-housing get training in compassionate communication, how to speak in an I voice about your own needs, and how to ask people if they would be willing to do something in a different way, etc. And also we agree to common values, and we encourage people, as we look at all the operational tasks and the committee memberships, to choose on the basis of their strengths to cover the tasks. Once you're living in a house and a housing project, then there are also work days when everybody pitches in the ways that they're capable. It was mentioned in the class last week that some co-housing offer, for people who are really way too busy to take part in either the decision-making or the operational tasks, they might pay a fee to cover the gap. Most important, you cover all of the tasks by planning ahead of time and trying to anticipate difficulties, etc., to minimize them through the bylaws and by preparing prospective owners ahead of time. And finally, we had a little bit of discussion of this very important question about how co-housing can accommodate different cultures, ethnicities, and languages. In some cases, a small number of people with their own language can get together and build a smaller community, say 5 to 8 units. In the larger communities where you have people speaking different languages, different cultures, different religions, etc., diversity training can be part of training in compassionate communication. And at whatever age, we can make a commitment to learning more and more. An example for me, I live in a 36 townhouse condo project, and my neighbor for about 5 years, she moved after that, was a native speaker of Arabic, and she had become a widow, and her husband had done all the communication for work and for neighbor with government, etc., and protected her, but she then was on her own and did not know enough English to answer the telephone or to understand what her mail was like. So she would come knock at our door next door and hand us a letter or have us listen to a phone message. You know how many useless phone messages you can get. She couldn't tell the difference between an important one and an unimportant one. So we would interpret for her and sometimes give her advice when she had to reply or prepare to go to a store to make a complaint or whatever. We would help her with the English for it. So I think there are neighborly ways in which we can accommodate diversity of many kinds, and that's what many people joining a co-housing community are looking for, is getting to know people different from themselves. I think that's my last slide, but I'm not positive, Chris.
Okay, let's see. Yes. Move to Bill after that.
Okay, going back to Judy.
Yeah.
Hi, I see some of you participants there.
I know.
Okay.
So now you're going to continue to share the slides?
Did the slides end? That's interesting.
Yeah.
It looks like someone else has started sharing, perhaps. Let's see what's going on here.
And I bet this has never happened before, Chris, right?
This is a new one. I'm just going to request control. If you are sharing something, then just click on the point where it says change control or whatever message comes up. And I will regain that. Okay, let me try this. Okay, so probably you can see the slides again?
Yes.
Oh, great. All right,
Thank you.
let's go.
Thanks, Chris. It's always exciting doing these presentations, isn't it?
It's an adventure.
So Bill Johnston, there you go. Well, anyway, Bill Johnston will be telling us next week about affordable housing in Hamilton. But are you getting the slides back, Chris?
Someone may be clicking the share content button. So I will just once again set that up. But if you could avoid clicking on that button, because it will change control.
We have a saboteur in our midst.
We might. Okay, I think we're good.
We're good. So Bill Johnston will be speaking next week, which will be very interesting. He'll be talking to us about affordable housing and the state of housing in Hamilton, which is not great at this point. Although I did see an article in the paper recently about something that they're looking at giving us some money for that, but I'm sure Bill will speak to that next week. So if we could have next, please, Chris. Thank you. So group process, co-housing or not, nothing facilitates a healthy relationship better than healthy communication. And that's just something that goes without, almost goes without saying. Healthy communication is key to having good relationships, as we probably all know from experience. Next, please. So working together, we'll learn about group process, compassionate communication, and group facilitation. I think what I like about co-housing is the fact that we sort of get out of ourselves, and it's not all about us or me or I, one person, or being individual. It's about being part of a group and working in something that's bigger than ourselves. And the good news about that is we truly do, and we are doing it now as we are meeting as a co-housing group at the moment. We really do benefit from the wisdom of the group. There's 9 of us, and we all bring something to the table, and as a result of that, we usually come up with a good decision. And the thing with co-housing is it's not hierarchical, and it's designed to give each of the members a voice that affects the community. It's not a majority rules. We all vote by consensus, it's ruled by consensus. Members participate in the design of the community. We make decisions. We will be developing it, designing it as we go forward. So we're an integral part of the design all the way through. A lot of us have experienced, of course, competitive, bureaucratic, authoritarian kinds of outfits or organizations, and that is not what co-housing will be. Next, please. So the group process is it's establishing the best course of action together. We all have ideas. The thing what we're doing is, as opposed to just sort of randomly speaking up, we take turns with respect to voicing our opinions, as it were, and then through a process, we basically come to a decision as to what suits us best as a group, not as an individual. And that's one thing we learn to do, is sort of put our own individual priorities aside. I mean, they're definitely part of the process, but it's not all about us, it's about the group. Next, please. Nonviolent communication is how it's sometimes termed, but we actually prefer the term compassionate communication, which is speaking with honesty and clarity, and at the same time listening and treating others with honesty and respect and empathy and kindness and all those good things that we wish the world was more about. It avoids letting our personalities become the medium in decision making, and it allows logic, care, and concern for the greater good to bring about the solution. It promotes tolerance and healthy communication. Again, those of us who are, I shouldn't say us because that means me, but those people who are terribly, very opinionated and unwavering in their opinion will find it a struggle, but they will learn that it's okay to let go sometimes and listen to other people with an open mind and an open heart. And it's surprising how ideas come up as a result of that. Next, please.
There it goes.
That's okay. I'm not sure, is there a lag? Is it showing up now, facilitating groups?
So facilitating groups, yes, I do see it on my screen.
Yeah.
Hopefully you see it on yours.
Yeah, so I like this slide. It's facilitating groups alone. You have the benefit of one opinion, which is your own. And often we think that's the only opinion that matters, but it's really not. In a community, you have the benefit of the opinions of all the members of the group. And furthermore, you can merge the best of those opinions into an overarching opinion that is better than even the best individual opinion. There's something really magical about that, to be quite honest. But I think of note, and again, we're learning this as we go, even now in our group. I mean, I'm sure we've all been in meetings and groups of people, but they all operate in different ways. But with this compassionate communication and sort of a sense of the group dynamics, we have to be really mindful of the process, and it's a learning curve, to be quite honest. And we're going through it right now, learning how to communicate in a sort of a better way. Because in a lot of bureaucracies, for example, there's power struggles, there's ego always gets in the way, defensiveness, being afraid to perhaps voice your opinion in case somebody scoffs at you. It does leave us vulnerable, but needless to say, in our environment, we're encouraged not to scoff at others, which we don't do. We just listen to everybody with kindness and respect, and it's a good way for people to learn that it's okay to share and nothing bad will happen. And getting people sort of out of those who tend to be quiet are learn that it is a safe place to be honest and open. And at the end of the day, it will be each person's responsibility to be responsible for themselves and to make sure that any opinions or concerns that they have are put on the table. Otherwise, we don't know. We can't read minds, but they're all treated with respect. I think that's the big thing, which we really like. So next, please, Chris. The features and effects of, well, this is both the features and effects of compassionate communication. Again, critically, it's honestly expressing and empathetically listening. And learning to be a good listener is key. I mean, how many times have I been in a conversation, and I'm sure a lot of people have, where you just can't wait for the other person to stop talking so that you can say what you want to say. But at the end of the day, that's really not exactly effective listening. It can be learned. Anything that we know to date can be learned to change to maybe a better form of communication. So as I mentioned before, each person is accountable for what he or she says and does. Everyone has the opportunity to affirm, deny, or qualify a position. Everyone's expected to respond with openness and sincerity. Everyone has the opportunity to take quantum leaps in personal growth, which is very, very rewarding. And we're able to maintain clarity in one's position instead of getting caught up in a power struggle. So it's not just a matter of thinking, it's not a competition as to whose opinion wins. It's a matter of what's best for the group, but we all put our opinions on the table and our comments and our concerns, and then we work through them and to come up with the best decision possible. And incidentally, as we go, as usual, through these slides, if you have any comments or questions, please put them in the chat or write them down, but put them in the chat if you can. And we'll address some of them next week, or perhaps at the end of today if we have time. So next slide, please. So consensus and sociocracy. I would be interested to know how many people here have ever heard of sociocracy. I had never heard of it before, and I don't think a lot of the people in our group have. But it is basically, very basically, consensus is a decision-making method, and sociocracy is a governance method based on consensus decision-making. It is a form of governance. The aim of sociocracy is inclusive decision-making. And just for sake of interest, there's 5 of us in our group now who are taking a 10-week course on sociocracy. I should have put the website up, but it's Sociocracy for All is the group that we're taking this course from. They're in the United States. Of course, we're taking it via Zoom. That's a big duh. But sociocracy, again, just for interest, I'll just give you a little bit of history about it. It's a mid-century French philosopher and writer named Auguste Comte. After a century of political revolution in France, where monarchies and aristocracies were overturned, Comte was searching for a rational basis for government. He had developed a philosophy called positivism, in which knowledge is based on what is known of the natural world, on what could be proven and not what a monarch or the church decreed. He believed that a society governed by social scientists could use the scientific method to decide the best social and economic policies, those that would serve all the people, not just some of the people. And the first application of sociocracy came in the Netherlands in a residential school community founded by Dutch pacifist and educator Kees Boek, I have no idea if that's the right pronunciation, and his English Quaker wife, Beatrice, during World War II. So they were both pacifists and, well, Quakers, pacifists. And in 1926, the Boeks had founded the first sociocratic organization. They needed a school for their 8 children and designed a children's community workshop and began adapting their Quaker and pacifist principles to build a community of students and teachers who functioned as equals. So that's where it started. And it's in several co-housing communities, a lot seem to be adapting this method of governance, which is what we're exploring at the moment.
Judy?
Yep.
I'd just like to make a comment that it's the term is consent, not consensus.
Okay.
So it's not agreement of the whole.
Yeah, you know, it's a funny thing, that consensus versus consent. I found different definitions depending on where I looked.
Okay.
But It is a decision-making method. Would you agree with that?
It is a decision-making method, but it's basically coming to a decision that no one objects to.
Yeah.
Rather than one that everyone agrees with.
Right. And therein lies some of the intrigue of this topic is consent, consensus, sociocracy. This is what we're working through right now. And I kept it brief here for that reason, but it is something that we're exploring. And it really, at the end of the day, is a fair and equitable decision-making process that we're exploring, as opposed to majority rules. We're not doing the all vote, and we're not using Robert's rules of law, and we're not voting. It's not a majority rules kind of a thing. But thank you for mentioning that, Ellen. I appreciate you joining in anytime you feel like it. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for presenting it so simply.
Yeah. Next, please. Okay, well, let's see. Now, making decisions by consensus doesn't mean that everyone's in complete agreement, but rather that a solution is found that all participants can live with, or at least willing to try. So at the end of the day, it's not yes or no. It's yes, I can live with it. I'm willing to try it. It's okay. And things can always be modified. But I guess an example that comes up is when in our co-housing community, well, our group, some time ago, the only major decision that we've faced at this point is whether or not we wanted our co-housing community to be adult or seniors only, or intergenerational, including families with children. And it was about 50-50 at one point. And that would be like, so I guess what would happen is, in a democratic system, maybe we would canvass one another and say, why don't you come over to our side? And so if one person, tilted the scales, then we would become one or the other, and the others wouldn't be happy. But what we do instead is we do rounds where everybody in the group has a say as to what they want, and then it goes around again. And at the end of the day, we made a decision that is compromise an okay word to use? Ellen, I understand it's not necessarily a compromise, but it seems to me that it's a compromise.
Yes, or a reasonable solution, a solution that everybody can accept.
Yeah.
And in our case, it was a creative option that we hadn't seen proposed by any other co-housing groups.
Yeah, you go ahead and explain it if you would.
Oh, we think of our project as a grand generational project, seniors led with up to 25% owners under 50. So we want the vibrancy of young people and of children, and on the other hand, we want to promote that seniors can solve their own housing problems and provide leadership. So we don't want to think that this is younger people coming up with solutions for older people. Thanks.
Yeah, and then the thing is that's the beauty about this group, is that we make decisions along the way as to how we want our community to look. And if we had all decided, as some co-housing communities do, some of them do decide they want seniors only, and some of them decide that they want intergenerational and whatever the case is. But we just decided, as Ellen said, that we want basically a combination of the two. And those who, I think one of the concerns of the ones who didn't want children, for example, they didn't want the noise of basketball courts and trampolines and that kind of thing. But again, it's we who will decide what will be in the community. So we don't have to have that. The kids, I think, will be benefiting from the fact that we all bring skills to the table, such as we've got a horticulturist in our group, like that kind of thing. And Ellen's a writer, and there's people who will learn the kids can learn how to bake or repair things in the workshop or whatever the case is. There'll be a lot of sort of almost like living on a farm in a way, in that there's a lot of natural ways to play and learn. So it's just, but again, this is a work in progress, but the decision was made through this method of everybody voicing their concerns and opinions, and then we came up with a creative solution. So we're pretty happy about that. And that won't be the only decision that we'll have to make. That will be quite interesting. But I think we're on to a good way of making those kinds of decisions. So next, please, Chris.
Oops. I just have to click in here again to refresh it. There it goes.
Yeah, it's got stuck a bit. So connection and co-healing, a key process, and this comes up, is like, what exactly does that even mean? Co-healing, what kind of care are you willing to give for other people that aren't your family, is essentially the bottom line. What do we do when everybody gets old in the co-housing community? Another question that comes up, what's it going to be like, and who's going to take care of us? Well, for one thing, we do expect a variety of ages. We're not going to be all in our 70s, 80s, and 90s moving into it. There'll be a variety of ages, and those people will be asked to contribute to the community any way that they can, to the best of their ability, kind of thing. So the next one, please. So what kind of care? There's more or less the three kinds. There's what you won't do for someone, that will be provided by outside care, care that you agree to do for a neighbor, and care that you never previously imagined you'd give, but that you do give because it's convenient and feels right, and that person is your friend. So those are the kind of questions that we can ask ourselves. I mean, obviously you don't need to make that decision now, but it's something that is bound to come up. And I think some of the other questions are, can we imagine taking care of each other and taking care of ourselves at the same time? Can we learn to nurture, support, and care for each other as more traditional cultures have always done? So those two things are, it's sort of getting out of the I mode and into the we as a group mode, and caring for one another. And then, there's definitely an element of reciprocity in co-housing in many respects. Charles Durrett, the author of some books, and the architect who brought the concept over from Denmark, he tells a story which I'm sure gets changed every time somebody relays it. But his story, to the best of my recollection, is that when he was in California, he had heart surgery. I might have told you this last week, but I'll tell it again. But he had heart surgery, and the doctors in the hospital asked who he has to go home to help him convalesce. And he said about 45 people, because he lived in co-housing. So there was no problem. And of course, they're happy to see him back and that he's well and he had his heart surgery and it's just a matter of convalescing. And so you can imagine people are bringing in his mail, bringing him a cup of tea, bringing him his dinner, keeping him company, you know, having a laugh with him. And there's no need to go to a respite care. A friend of mine who's only my age, so quite young, she had to have an ankle replacement, and because she had no one living at home, she ended up in Toronto in a rehab for 3 months, and it was not a very pleasant experience. Whereas if she lived in co-housing, she wouldn't have to do that, because with a broken ankle, you can still live in your home if you've got someone to come in and help you out once in a while. So the next one, if you would, please. Outside care. That's something that is an option, and that will just depend, I guess, on who's in our group. Caregivers can be hired to provide personal care. They can be shared among the care can be shared among residents, and the care is managed by the residents. We do the hiring and firing. So in the common house, one thing we will have is 2 or 3, I'm not sure, we haven't decided that by a long shot, but we will have what we call guest suites, and perhaps 2 of them, one for guests and one that could be converted into a permanent caregiver suite if that ever comes up, so that we can have a live-in caregiver if we want, or if there's not enough need for that, we can have a caregiver who comes in on a regular basis to help with those people who need the care, and the cost would be shared by all those people. It would be the same caregiver presumably, and it's a private arrangement, as opposed to going through an agency that you just don't know who you're going to get, and it changes all the time. And I think at the end of the day, the beauty about co-housing as well is that with that kind of care in your home in the co-housing, either informal or a caregiver, it really can delay having to move into assisted living and or long-term care for as long as possible. Next, please, if you would. So co-care. We can agree to certain things that are easy to do, like bringing dinner, making up a cup of tea, bringing in the mail, picking up some shopping for somebody, picking up the prescription, and keeping them company. Just having a cup of tea with someone when they're not feeling well or just recuperating from surgery or an illness. I mean, that goes a long way to helping people when they're mentally satisfied and emotionally fulfilled as well. The emotional support actually plays a huge part in prevention and recovery. Next, please. And the unexpected, I guess, in a community such as co-housing, relationships will evolve into meaningful friendships, important, true friendships, which is aided by the community proximity and the cooperation, which generates emotional support. And that is such an important component of health, wellness, prevention and wellness. I mean, I think it would help prevent illness in the first place in a lot of cases. But when someone is ill or needs surgery or whatever, that emotional support is helpful to get them back on track. Next, please. Oh, Ellen, were you going to say something?
Yes, I was going to make a comment. I read an article this morning about some of the co-housing communities and how they're adapting to COVID. So the small private space, large shared space, well, can be a problem when the pandemic is on or something like that. But what I heard is it being so easy to help each other even without going into each other's unit, in terms of a small group making the dinner and leaving takeout meals at everybody's door or at the door of people who are especially lonely or whatever. During the summer, they had outdoor movies, physically distanced, and they would designate one person to go and do everybody's errand at the grocery store or at the pharmacy. So there were fewer people going to the pharmacy, so that would help both the community, but also the pharmacy. Instead of having 10 different people coming in to pick up drugs, they could have just the one. So those are of how living in community can even make it through the pandemic.
Yeah, that sure makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. And I think, again, there's just something nice about being involved in a group that cares for each other. I think the question might come up that maybe the first day that we move in, kind of thing. You say to yourself, now that we're all in the same boat, how are we going to support each other? You'd have that conversation ahead of time. But this is one of the things that we will be dealing with going forward, that we just haven't really, it's something that we're aware of that we will be needing to address in the future, but it hasn't come up as to what exactly we are willing to do, and what we don't even know it yet who all the residents are going to be. So it's difficult to answer these questions with any accuracy, but it's certainly something to think about. The next slide, please. So you can just maybe take a couple of minutes, if you would, and just consider these questions. What's the most nurturing experience you've ever had in your life while sick? When's the last time you were ill? What type of illness was it? Explain how you received care. Was it family, friends, or paid? What kind of care did you receive, and how would you rate the quality of that care? And then describe an experience in which you were the caregiver. So just take maybe 3 minutes to just sort of consider those questions. And if there's anything that comes up in the chat, Chris, that you want to share, then please do so. So if there's any comments about these questions or anything, any other comments, Chris, if you could share them, that would be great. Chris? I can't see the chat room myself.
Hi, Judy. It's Justine. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hi, I think Chris just said he was stepping away for a minute.
Oh, okay. Okay, so who's doing the slides? Oh, I guess he's coming back. All right. Thanks, Justine.
Yeah, I can read some of the responses that are in the chat if you want.
Oh, yeah, please, please.
Okay, so we have a couple about experiences, nurturing experiences. And one thing that was helpful was knowing that someone was close by that you can trust. Another one here is the most nurturing came from a friend rather than healthcare professionals. Even though she did have a background in nursing, she wasn't as constrained by like healthcare responsibilities for other patients and could focus more on their specific needs.
Mm-hmm. Very good. You can't forward the slide, can you, Justine? Oh, you're back, Chris.
I am back, yes.
Can you forward the
Sorry about
slide, please? Thank you.
To skip one ahead? Oh, sure.
Community. Community. This is just, well, actually, you can get an idea in the back there. Those are the kind of little detached or attached, I think they are, little bungalows that I have in mind that, but again, that doesn't mean they're going to happen. It's just that that's sort of the picture that I get in my mind of what these places might look like. At least some of them could look like these little attached bungalows with a porch. The porch has obviously always been known for its your ability to sort of converse with people as they walk by or wave or whatever the case is. And it's just clearly an opportunity to just have a very informal, casual, quick, how are you doing on the way to laundry or whatever the case is. And community is a good way of getting nurturing, supportive care. That's not exactly the supportive caring picture, but it's still an example of just being connected with other people on an ongoing basis. Next, please. So some of the factors important to resilient aging are the social support, or excuse me, social cohesion, positive outlook, and accepting the changes that occur with aging. And that's not necessarily an easy thing, because sometimes we look in the mirror and we think, what happened? You're just not that same person that you were 30 years ago or even 10 years ago. My mom lived with us for 10 years, and of course I was always her child, but to her in her 90s, someone who's 80 is young, so it's always relative. But accepting the changes is huge, as opposed to just always trying to fight them. And I guess the people who are subjected to, for example, plastic surgery, that's an example of not accepting the changes. And staying engaged, having a sense of purpose, continuing to grow and learn, staying connected with family and friends. They're all things that are important to resilient aging, which is a term that Ellen definitely prefers to successful aging, because what is successful aging? It would be kind of hard to quantify that. Of course, the community that we have now, we used to meet at Grace Lutheran Church in West Hamilton in person, which was really nice. And we'd have potluck dinners once a month or something like that, which was fantastic. And now, of course, our community is confined to Zoom calls, but it's still something. It's better than nothing. Next, please. There she is in all her glory. Old age ain't no place for sissies. I'm sure a lot of people would agree with that. Next, please. Staying healthy through community. Community meaning co-housing, co-ownership, where you're living with other people, or like what Ellen's saying is that her neighborhood has its own form of community, because they've banded together, and I know they used to get together, I think every Thursday for wine at, after for what do they call it? What's that called? After hours or whatever, for a drink of wine in the early evening, that kind of thing. But any form of community is you're able to acknowledge and support a zest for life, a belief that we still have a lot of living to do. We benefit by having others in our immediate environment who share and listen to our daily happenings. We let go of our egos. We enhance our communication skills, both listening and sharing, and we have shared interests. Music, gardening, hiking, reading, yoga, meditation, travel when we can do it. I mean, what are some other options? I mean, sailing. I know one of our ladies in our group was an avid sailor, and the person who works was our consultant, Co-Housing Options Canada. He's an avid sailor, so there's likely an opportunity to meet someone who has the same interests as you, even if it's not even like chess, for example, and cards, whatever the case may be. So community provides a lot of opportunity to be involved in various activities. I think, as we all know, because it's certainly in the papers and in a lot of different articles, is that loneliness and isolation is a massive cause of premature death and illness. And I think I've said this before, that at the end of the day, we do not outgrow our need for others. That's sort of baked into the human way of being, is that we need connection with other people. And so in co-housing, because of the proximity, it's easy to connect with other people and easy to interact with other people on a daily basis as required. And having said that, there's the option of the privacy of your own home as well, because we all need privacy at the same time. I at some point during this process, I was talking about co-housing as something for other people to do. I thought, oh, this is great for seniors, never realizing that apparently I am one. And that was a surprise when that happened. But I thought, well, this is a great idea for you people. And then the more I got into it, and this kind of thing being an example of all the benefits of living in a community, I thought, why wouldn't I live there too? So that's what my intent now is, to be part of the community as opposed to just talking about it, because I can't see a reason why I wouldn't do it. It's got everything going for it and nothing against it. I think a lot of people are a little concerned about the lack of privacy, but that's not the case. You still have the privacy of your own home, and the advantages that the community lends itself as well. And another community that I still belong to is the Rotary Club, and I think I joined, it must be about 9 years ago now. We used to meet in the Dundas Golf and Country Club, and I remember in the ballroom there, and it's a beautiful location anyway, but no matter what was going on in my day or my personal life or whatever, as soon as I walked into the ballroom, through the doors, I sensed that I was enveloped by the camaraderie and warmth and, dare I say, love of the Rotary. And I sat with people, different people every week as we did, and it was all just chatting and catching up, and it was just such a positive environment that I really enjoyed those Tuesday afternoons. Now, of course, we meet by Zoom. It's not the same, but this is not going to last forever. But I guess the point is that the Rotary Club is also an example of people with sort of common mission, values, and vision, agreeing on what they're there for, and just caring about each other, and we do. The next one, if you would, please. So a strong supportive community of some sort is important. The co-housing really does, I couldn't find a picture of a village, but it does recreate a village-like environment where residents are in a reciprocal support, and they do tend to stay happier and healthier longer. This whole notion of shared values, vision, and mission, which we would promote and share with newcomers, and mutual support. It's almost, maybe it's a bit more crass, but it's, you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. It's a lovely thing to do, but it actually is practical as well. No matter where we are, no matter where we live, I think it's important to cultivate the richest social network you possibly can, because we do not outgrow our need for others. And I guess the richest social network, as opposed to just one person, because if something happens to that one person, then you put all your eggs in one basket, as it were, and that's not going to bode well if that person moves or becomes ill themselves. And next, please. So connectedness and belonging, the social cohesion results from the friendship, bonding, and proximity. And again, I go back to Rotary. When I joined Rotary, I didn't know a single person, but over time you get to know everybody, and you care about them because you know them. And same with the co-housing community. You may not know anybody when you move in, but you will very soon get to know people, and you'll get to care about them. And it's a lovely feeling to have that in your life. So we do need to have that sense of feeling connected, in the sense of belonging. There's bad habits that we can get rid of to make ourselves healthier, but I think the positive impact of social connectedness is right up there with quitting smoking and drinking or whatever other overeating, all those bad habits that we have. But becoming socially connected with a group or several people is very important to positive health. And good friends are more fun than bad habits at the end of the day. I think when in our co-housing community, I think we learn to become a little bit less self-conscious, a little bit more outspoken, a little bit more confident about voicing what we mean and what we want, and learning that it is a safe environment. It really truly is. And if there was someone that was irksome, as Ellen once said, I love that word, then we would deal with that. I mean, we don't know what's going to come up in the future, but we will have a plan of some sort to deal with people who perhaps don't fit in that maybe are a little bit aggressive, but at this point we don't have that in our group at all. Everyone gets along. We enjoy. We rarely miss a meeting. We meet every single Friday, and we very, very rarely miss a meeting unless somebody's actually away or truly ill. And we all look forward to getting together. And every time we meet, we make progress, and it's just so encouraging. We move forward, and there's always something to be thankful for at the end of the meeting. And one of the things that we do in our group as a result of the Sociocracy is that we actually check in with each other at the start. It's not like a business meeting where you really don't care what other people are feeling. We take the time to go around the group and how are you feeling, what's going on, blah, blah, blah. If you don't want to share, that's absolutely fine as well. But sometimes someone is having a bad day or they've broken their leg or whatever the case is, and they do want to share. And then they get the collective awe, and then they feel better, and we all feel glad that they shared with us, and we just move on to business at that point. The next one, if you would, please. So social cohesion minimizes stress and its physiological responses, cognitive decline with aging, susceptibility to clinical illness, risks of disability from chronic diseases, rates of coronary heart disease, risk of depression and anxiety, psychological despair, and duration of negative emotional states. And I don't think this comes as a surprise to anybody. This is pretty common knowledge that the lack of social cohesion or the lack of social contact is not very good for us. There's someone who I just started visiting in Hamilton. He's in his mid-90s and lives by himself, and his daughter believes that he's developing or maybe has early dementia, but he lives by himself. And so I'm visiting now once a week to just because of that, just to keep him company. And I met him last week for the first time, and his daughter was there, and his ankles are swollen. He's got something, and his ankles are swollen, but they're going down and they're better and they're discolored, but everything's coming along. But I guess what happens is he focuses on his legs because he's by himself and he doesn't really have much else to distract him with that. So unfortunately, that's what he's focusing on is his legs, and he's always asking his daughter what's going to happen next. And there's really nothing that's going to happen next. It's just, they're just checking on them as long as the wounds don't open and whatnot. So again, he would be an ideal candidate for a co-housing community because he would have more people in his life that would distract him from something negative like that. There's another example that my mom, that she lived in our house for 10 years. Actually, we're living in her house. My mom and dad bought the house I'm in 1968, and I left when I was 19 and went away for a long time and came back and with my husband, and then we all, the three of us, lived together in this same house, and she's gone now, but she lived with us. But my husband and I were both working, busy as usual, the usual story, always out doing something. And at the end of the day, she did spend a lot of time on her own, even in how she was on her own a lot. And I think at the end of the day, she would have been probably better off if we had lived in co-housing at that time, because she would have had the pleasure of my company and my husband's, but also the pleasure of other people's company when we weren't around. And she could just, wander over to the common house when she wanted to have a cup of tea with someone, or sit on the front porch and neighbors would walk by and say hi. So there's an awful lot going for co-housing for sure. The next one, please. So social cohesion or connection maximizes all the good stuff, the feelings of love, esteem, and value, healthier behavior patterns, opportunities for social engagement, a sense of identity and belonging, a sense of security, stability, longer life expectancy, greater survival from heart attacks, motivation to care for oneself, enhanced immune system, patient recovery rates from a variety of health conditions, and the positive effect of interactions. It's all good. There's nothing negative about social cohesion. It's all the positive stuff, because I don't know what element there is in our bodies. Is it dopamine? All those things that is maximized because we feel better about ourselves and because we are in company, especially if you're in the company of people who you also like and respect, and that's reciprocated. Next, please. There's actually a woman that called me as a result of that article that was in the newspaper. She called me. She lives in Hamilton, and she didn't want to do anything with cohousing, but she just wanted to share her story, which I loved, because she loved the idea of what we're doing so much that she called to share her story, which is she has a very large, I think 16-room house in Hamilton somewhere, and she's an older person herself, and she took it upon herself to rent out. I guess she renovated a bit, but she rents out to four seniors who are on fixed incomes, as a lot are. And so now the five of them live in this large house in Hamilton, all having their own bedroom and sharing the kitchen, and I think they take turns doing the laundering the sheets and towels, but they do their own personal laundry. Again, they would absolutely have their own rules organized. But the beauty about it is, like, I think they're $500 a month, and that gives the people on these fixed incomes or like pensions money left over to do things without having to just, submit most of their income to accommodation, which I believe Bill will be touching on next week. And it's just such a lovely thing to do. It's just a kind thing to do. She didn't have to do it. She's not even making money, but she's just wanted the fact that she is lucky to have a big house with other people who aren't so fortunate. Imagine if everybody did that. That would be fantastic. So the benefits of community, the richer the social life, the more stimulated and therefore healthy a senior will be. That makes a lot of sense, because the stimulation being a key word there, I think, just being not entertained necessarily, but engaged and curious, and having someone to engage and be curious with about a multitude of different topics, because that's the beauty of cohousing. We have such a variety of people in the group, as you would. So we all get to take advantage and make the most out of that variety. Next, please. But apparently in Italy, psychiatrists have fewer clients than North America, where it's common to see, of course, in North America, it's extremely common to see a therapist or a counselor or a psychiatrist. But in Italy, places like that, they have a huge inbuilt support system with their family, friends, and neighbors, as we know. And I think that, unfortunately, I think that also contributed to the high numbers we still have high numbers during COVID, because they are so family oriented and hugging and all that kind of good stuff, that we in North America, we often tend, and especially men, unfortunately, but a lot of people tend to keep things to themselves because of pride, and just we're sort of culturally not so encouraged to share things so much as they in Italy, places like that. They're much more open to share their concerns, their sorrows, their hurts, emotional turmoil, whatever it is, and they were able to express their needs better than we are in some ways. And for us, some of us, it's easier to turn to people to express how you're feeling and that you need help, even if it's a friend or a professional, either one. But for others, that would be a skill that maybe needs to be learned. But I think the older men, especially, I think I'm okay when I say that, but older men especially have been taught that boys don't cry, and it's not okay to, you don't want to complain, you just suck it up and I'll be okay, and I don't want to talk about it. Well, that's not good for one's health either. So perhaps in cohousing, or even in not cohousing, but if one can learn that it's okay to share problems, because we all need to be heard at times. So the proximity, again, this is just another example of opportunities abound for just spontaneous conversation. You just stop by and chat with people. And I certainly want to stress that it's not meant to be a panacea. There's absolutely going to be problems and challenges and personality conflicts and all the rest of it. It's not going to be rosy. And in fact, there is such a thing as, I guess, a honeymoon period, I would imagine, because at first it's probably, oh, this is so cool. But then reality will set in and you will notice things that aren't right and maybe not as you expected. But I think those things can be dealt with and will not supersede the positive aspects of cohousing. Like whatever does come up, we'll just deal with it. But we will absolutely always be benefiting from all the positive things about cohousing. Next, please. So these are a little bit tough, but if you can just consider for a minute any of these situations, your son, daughter, niece, close friend, whatever, is getting a divorce, your pet died, you received a large bill that wasn't correct and it's really put you off, or you require surgery or a medical procedure, who do you call? Do you have somebody to call? I hope you do, but not everybody does. And these are kinds of things that you really don't want to have to deal with on your own. So at the end of the day, in a co-housing community, again, I know in my co-housing group right now, I would not feel funny at all about sharing anything with any of the people in that group. But maybe, I don't know if Ellen, if you want to say anything, but I think women are a lot easier to confide in people, but I think the opportunity is there in co-housing anyway. Even if you don't share, you know that there is somebody there that you can share with.
Yes, I could comment. I think in the community, you're guaranteed that if something like this happens, that there's somebody you can talk to. You can either choose to go out and the first person you see say, oh, this just happened to me, what do I do? Or when something like this happens, if you don't have somebody in your family, or even after you call your family member and they're going to be there in an hour, you could go sit on your porch and somebody might drop by and say, you look a little sad. And telling somebody who's not going to be caught up in the same way as a family member can also be helpful. So if somebody is not your closest friend, that can help in a different way than having your closest friend there to take you to the hospital or take you to the bank or lawyer or whatever. So I think the proximity works there as well. And just the confidence or security, if this kind of thing happens, I'll be okay.
Yeah.
And so many people in the community who've aged counting on 3 people, but you go from 60 to 80 and those 3 people may all be gone for you for one reason or another.
Yeah. I think in the co-housing, there's the phrase, you are never alone, comes to mind. Because you aren't, you're not alone. There's always somebody there, and the caring for one another is baked into co-housing. I think the people who want to live there want that lifestyle of caring for one another and supporting one another. And even if the person can't help you, they're there to listen and perhaps commiserate and say, yeah, I know how you feel. You know, that's just a nice thing for someone. I know how you feel, and same thing happened to me, and they can maybe share some advice or options, or at least they're there, pat on the shoulder, and just to have a little bit of support it goes a long way.
Right, and if you're a real introvert, you might, like my husband, you might not go out the door or make a phone call, but you feel better knowing that you could.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's true. You feel the love, it's just there.
That's
it's all
right.
Around. So the next slide, if you would, please. Someone to talk to. So again, recall a recent situation in your life when you needed to discuss something with a trusted friend or confidant. I tend to keep things to myself a lot of the times. I think that's maybe it's a natural thing to do. I don't know, but at least I know I have people I can call for sure. I have people I can call. So even like Ellen says, even if you choose not to, you know, which is not necessarily the smartest thing, but you do have that option in co-housing. If you don't have a family, like some of us, I don't have my own children. Some people don't have children, or their families live a long way, you know, across Canada or other parts of the world. It's nice to have somebody close by to talk to. Next, please. The emotional support one receives. Now, these are the 4 women who live in Port Perry, the Golden Girls. They started a co-ownership in Port Perry. They bought 2 of them bought a big house, or bought a big house, and they renovated it. And now the 4 ladies, they're all in their late 60s or 70s, live together in the house, and they share the house. They have their own bedroom, but they have I forget what it is, something like it's a big it's a big house with a big downstairs, in which they have a caregiver suite ready and available if they get to that point. But they share all the expenses, and they obviously share, you know, some of the kitchen time, and And again, they have their own, this is a little bit different because they are sharing a kitchen and sharing a living room, but it's absolutely an option. And I know Jocelyn Weatherby, and I must remember next week to put up her information. Jocelyn Weatherby is very involved in co-ownership, which is what this is more about. And like that woman I mentioned on in Hamilton, the one who's renting out rooms in her house, not to say she's an option, but there's people out there, and there's a couple of services that I know of. If anyone is looking for that kind of an arrangement, that you wouldn't mind sharing a room in a big house with some other people, there's a service there. There's a couple of services that I can share with you next week if you want to get in touch with those people, because at the end of the day, you can see that there's community here. It's in the form of 4 women, but they're all sharing the house together, and they've got a beautiful. Apparently, they've renovated the place, and the bedrooms are beautiful, and they've got their own ensuite bathrooms, and so they're pretty happy. But funnily enough, when they started this, the neighbors were really upset with them because they thought, oh my God, what's going in next door? It can't be 4 older ladies. I mean, surely there goes the neighborhood. I don't know what the neighbors are thinking, but apparently they really were upset about it. And the city or the town of Port Perry, they passed a bylaw that they're prohibiting people from sharing a house who aren't related. And as a result of that, it's I don't know where it is now, but there's an act that's through in Parliament called the Golden Girls Act, which is to stop that from happening. You can't tell people that you can't share a house just because you're not related. I mean, that's not the kind of world we want to live in. So they really were pioneers. And there was a conference I was in Toronto about 1.5 years ago, and it was about co-ownership, which is where I got all this interest in this kind of stuff. And one of them was there. One of those ladies was at this conference speaking about her experience, and it was really interesting and very encouraging. So that is absolutely an option as well. It's not just our co-housing community. We're speaking about that because that's what we're doing, but there's absolutely other options as well. And if anybody wants information as to how to get involved in a co-ownership community or a co-ownership situation, either buying into it or renting from someone, then I can share some information about that. There was a place in Guelph as well that there was and I haven't checked on it lately, but there was a woman there who had a house with 6 units in her house, wanting to sell 1/6 of her house. And I don't know how that went about, because I know she was having problems, because I think there was 6 units available, and people are just kind of, maybe if someone had bought one, they'd think, okay, I'll buy one now, but no one wanted to be the first. And there's a little bit, it's not challenging to get a mortgage, but it's just different, and it's absolutely doable. So anything's possible. It's certainly, if you have a lawyer, because you'd have to have the help of a lawyer. These people, as I would suggest for our community and any co-ownership or any home sharing, you would have a written agreement. You would be encouraged to have a written legal agreement as to what the rules are if you want to move, or whatever the case is. But anyway, that's who those women are there, and they look really happy. So it must be true. So the next one, if you would, please. Things to process in our lives, as obviously as the older we get, the more we have to process. Losses, emotional pain, handling and sharing health issues, regrets and other sighs, and celebrations. There's lots of, not just bad things, there's lots to celebrate. And who do you celebrate and share things like the not so much fun things as well? Who do you share things with? Next, please. So accessible friendships. I know people say, a lot of us have friends around the country, around North America, around the world, which is great. But how often do you actually see them? And they're not there if you need somebody because something has happened that you really could do with some support right now. You don't want to, well, we can't travel now anyway, obviously. So it's nice to have friends all over the country, but it's also important to have someone next door or close by who could be there when you need someone as well. Somebody accessible. Next, please. So here we are to the fun part again. The homework. Now this is going to be hard on your own because you're asked to close your eyes and read the instructions, but you get the idea, is that you relax, and then you just imagine that your doctor's called you and is concerned about a health issue that you've just been tested for, and he or she wants you to come into the office the next day to talk about it. And you think, oh, it could be something major. And so as you are now, you imagine living in your current situation. What would you do? And imagine being in a co-housing community or another kind of community. What might you do? What do you need in order to process your thoughts and feelings? And then you jot down any notes and sit quietly with those thoughts and feelings for 3 or 4 minutes and write things down. I know Ellen's a big believer in writing things down. I think a lot of us have been taught over the years that journaling is beneficial. So this might be something, again, just to kind of, it's not necessarily won't necessarily be the nicest things to think about, but it's something that will possibly happen in the future, where something will come up and you will be thinking, okay, now who am I going to talk to? I think obviously the bottom line is, do you have someone to talk to about things like this, major life changes and situations that come up? And of course, the questions and the homework, again, we'll email them to you so that you have them. You don't have to write all this down. Next, please, Chris. And then again, this is kind of going back a little bit to the 10-year question of where you were in 10 years and where you'll be in 10 years. And you just consider, however old you are now, in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now, as your friends, siblings, your spouse, partner, etc., experience physical decline and or die, or if your spouse or closest confidant or friend gets Alzheimer's, if your health becomes compromised, mobility or whatever you may or may not develop, that you consider how those things might affect your life going forward, and think about how would you feel about asking for help from neighbors you have helped before yourselves, compared to getting agency help or paying for help. So would you feel okay asking a neighbor for help, or would you prefer to get an outside, like to pay someone to help? Or, you know, there's obviously volunteer services as well you can call upon for people that need support of some sort at home. And what services for seniors have you experienced or do you know about? And what have your experiences been like? Or if you've never used those senior services, what have you heard about them in your own community? There's clearly there's services around, because there's a lot of people that want to do the best that they can for seniors. But you just consider yourself what it would be like for your own personal life. I think that's the last slide, Chris. Could you just go ahead? No, there's still more. Sorry. Sorry about that.
One more after this.
I know. So make a list of positive outcomes you would like to see regarding current issues, concerns, and or sorrows you'd like to talk to others about. So if you've got something in your life now, an issue, a concern, a sorrow, a sadness, a problem, something that's bothering you, would you like to talk to somebody else about it? And how do you think living in a community would help you express it? Again, sometimes we keep things to ourselves, which is not good for our health and doesn't help. Just getting it out, sometimes even writing it down is better than nothing, but expressing it to someone, verbalizing it seems to be, well, that's why people go to therapists. But if you have a friend or a neighbor or a loved one that you can share things with, that's great. How would living in community help you express them? Well, that kind of goes without saying. You've got a variety of people to whom you could express things to. And aside from your spouse or partner, if you have one, who nurtures you? Who can you depend on for advice? And how do you communicate with them? Phone, text, email? Is this person available when you need them? Or are they in another part of the country or the world? Or are they next door? And what do you like or not like with your current level of connection and intimacy with friends, neighbors, coworkers, and others? What do you like or not like with your current level of connection and intimacy with friends, neighbors? Maybe you're just right the way you are, or maybe that could be improved upon. But again, these questions aren't necessarily the most pleasant to have to consider for some people, but they're probably quite important to consider as part of getting out of denial as well, because we all are getting older, sadly. Well, not sadly, I shouldn't have said that. That's the wrong thing to say. But we are getting older, and that's a good thing, because some people aren't lucky enough that they do get older. I think the thing is to just make the best of it. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. We can take control of our lives and make some decisions so that we can age with resilience and as best we can. So that is the last slide. I'm not sure if Ellen has anything to add, or this is some of our contact information again. And just so you know, this Saturday, 10:30 till noon, every month we have what we call coffee and co-housing, which used to be at a coffee shop. Now it's via Zoom, and it's really not so much a presentation. It's a limited presentation. It's more about an opportunity to ask questions about co-housing in general and co-housing Hamilton in particular. So if you wanted to join that in that group, anybody can join the group on Saturday. This coming Saturday morning, I would just send you out a Zoom link. So you can, what would you do? I guess you just let Chris know if you'd like to join, or you can email, my email's right there, cohousinghamilton@gmail.com. And Ellen and I and Bill, we're all members of the Hamilton Aging and Community. That is an excellent website, hamiltonagingtogether.ca. Ellen, do you want to just talk a little bit about Hamilton? I was just going to say what it is, but you know more about it because you started it. So just explain a little bit about what Hamilton Aging and Community is, if you would, please.
Okay. We started Hamilton Aging and Community 7 years ago in November. Our first presentation was by now a good friend, Norma Gamble from Oakville, to talk to us about various alternative housing possibilities, including co-housing and building suites. She was designing ways of renovating the 4-bedroom houses, of which many of our suburbs have aplenty, into 3 suites, 3 or 4 suites for individual owners or renters. And she had this idea in a neighborhood, you could have perhaps 4 or 5 such houses. So you'd have a community of 20 or so, and they would be able to share activities and share housing issues, etc. So she was giving us an introduction to alternatives for housing, and now 7 years later, we are moving ahead with Co-Housing Hamilton. In the meantime, we were very supportive of McMaster Symbiosis, the program which matches graduate students with seniors who have space to rent, mutually supportive possibility. We also have the website and a bi-weekly newsletter which offers information about events in the community. You might want to sign up for that Aging and Community list by sending me an email. We also offer talks and workshops like this course on resilient aging, on writing, on gardening, various resilient aging issues. And we also have a mutually supportive support group called Aging Together. We have about 60 people in that group, and we're trying to, I guess, our vision, our mission is to inform about resilient aging, to model it with the Aging Together group, and inspire people like you about resilient aging, including innovative housing. So thanks for the opportunity to give my blurb, Judy.
Yeah, no problem. I don't know if Bill or Justine, if you want to chime in, or Chris, if there's anything in the chat box that you want to share.
There are some questions to relay, but if Bill or Justine want to chime in first, we can do that.
I put them on the spot, so I shouldn't have. I know, I didn't mean to. You don't have, if there's nothing, because Bill's going to have a chance to meet, to talk next week. And Justine is a student that is helping us out, and which we're very grateful for, because we've got a lot of work to do, and she's helping us out along with another young woman, Jasminder. So that's awesome. So again, if anybody wants to put anything in the chat that we could talk about next week, or if you have questions about this week, then please put them in the chat, and then we'll talk about it at next Thursday's session. And I don't think there's anything else that I need to share, because I don't need to keep talking for the sake of it. Does anybody have any questions? Anybody who's out there?
Yeah, I'll put out the questions that have come through during the presentation. We still have a few more minutes for that. Yeah, absolutely. The first question was just, is there a way to access notes from week 1? If you have not, if you're new to the program, they were sent out last week, but if you give me an email, I can forward the notes from week 1 to you. So I'm at C D'Agostino, sorry, C D'Agosti, DAGOSTI hpl.ca. You probably have it on your email anyway to join the session. Just send me a message and I will be happy to mail those to you. The next question is, how does the co-housing tribal, quote unquote, tribal village engage with the surrounding, quote unquote, community? So like, how does it look when you're, I guess you have touched on that a bit with the Golden Girls, but do you have anything else you want to say about that?
Oh, that's a good question. It's never meant to be a gated community. It's never meant to be a, I wonder what goes on over there kind of thing. We want to be really integrated with the surrounding neighborhood. I think that's what the question is.
That sounds like it to me too.
Yeah, we want to be really integrated with the surrounding community. And if anything, we would probably end up doing something with our common house that we might be able to share, like have some kind of an activity. Like I always make this up as an example for some reason, but like maybe the brownies meet there on Thursdays at 6 o'clock or whatever the case is. But I think Ellen had mentioned we could have like music night or poetry or Ellen teaches writing courses, so we could maybe have a writing class that the neighbors would be invited to come to. We'd probably have barbecues. What else would we do, Ellen? I think we definitely want to be open to the neighborhood. I think
the outdoor movies sound good, like fun.
That would be fun. And we already know, we already anticipate we're going to have some pushback from neighbors because nobody likes something different in their backyard. But I think Charles Duret's done 55 of these projects, and I think I already would have figured this out myself, is that we will have to go to some extent door to door, introducing ourselves and saying, yeah, that's us over there. We're the ones that are going to be moving in or wanting to move in. And of course, there'll be, what do they call it? A public notice for any dissent or any objections, which I expect we'll get. Because as I say, people don't want change in their neighborhood, which is fair enough. But I think once we're there and we invite them over to, maybe we'll have a little meeting once we can meet, which will happen. We'll invite them to a meeting with us and listen to their fears and concerns and show them how cool we are. And they'll say, oh, great, we're glad that you're joining our neighborhood. I think it might take a while to break down some barriers and to assuage some of the concerns. But once they see who we are, that we're not scary, that we're just a different kind of a house, that's all. Because we don't want to keep expanding the suburbs and building more single family homes. We don't need that. We need to intensify, and we want the community because it satisfies so many needs, not just personally, but in our society as a whole as well.
And there's a comment too that Abbeyfield co-housing is right in the middle of a neighborhood. It's a maximum of 15 people based on a British model.
Yeah.
Okay, so that sounds great.
Yeah, I think Abbeyfield, I could be wrong, and hopefully this person will correct me if I am wrong. That's in Toronto, I think, but I think it's subsidized housing, I believe, but I could be wrong on that. So I apologize if I am. But
and it is a model for caregiving.
Okay,
so it's a model for assisted living.
And they say Durham,
but they do create a community. Of people. Yes, as a small community of people.
I mean, there's residential homes in Dundas where I live. There's 2 or 3 residential homes where people, I think they are lower income, that they live together, and there's some community there. It's probably preferable for some than living by themselves I mean, at least there's some opportunity for some people to be sharing a sort of a community environment as opposed to living by themselves.
Absolutely. I think it was mentioned that Bill may be handling this question next week, but the question was, how does cost/income affect who can join the community? Many people I've mentioned this idea to have the immediate response of, I won't be able to afford that.
Yeah, well, I think to be honest, I think at this point, when we started this group, and I don't know if this doesn't sound very good or not, but it really is a group that we're building it for ourselves at this point, because we're going to be moving into it, and there is absolutely going to be an element of buying into it, and the people presumably will be selling a house and buying into this co-housing community. Now, having said that, we haven't decided yet, and this is another example of a decision that we will be making, but we have absolutely been talking about having some of the units available for rent, for example, because we really want to be inclusive as best we can. but we never sort of purported to be affordable per se. Like we're not affordable as far as geared to income or anything like that, or even, I don't know. I mean, it's a new build, so how inexpensive can it possibly be? We have to pay for it. We're paying for the build ourselves, so it is what it is whenever we get to that point of building. But we want to be inclusive, and from what Charles Durrett said, like whoever in our group, wherever we are economically, they try to, he would, if he was helping us as the architect, would help design the place so that it does accommodate people to the best of our ability. So they're not high-end units. They're all going to be basic. You can do what you want with it afterwards, but there will be some 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, some, again, I'm just putting this out there as a possibility. Some may be attached bungalows. There might be a little 2-story condos, like a stacked townhouse. There may be a very, very low-rise condominium style building that, you know, if there's people that want it, there could even be a bachelor kind of a unit if that was suitable for someone. The smaller the size, needless to say, the less expensive it will be. So and some people don't want a garden, and they're happy to be in a condo unit with a balcony, and they'll all be lovely and new. But I think in terms of the cost, I don't think we can lower the cost substantially because we'll be paying for it ourselves. Ellen, help me out here.
I think you did very well, Judy. I think that's what some co-housing centers do. The corporation might buy 3 or 4 of the smaller units, and then the corporation would rent. And we also would be promoting home sharing. So some of the bigger units might be shared by 2 people. Yeah. So that home sharing arrangement, and one might own it or both might be renting it. So we hope to have our rules allow for that.
Yes.
And we and the other people in our group will be making that decision for ourselves.
And anybody who joins our group now would also be part of the decision-making process.
Right.
The other thing is, I just forgot. That's what happens when you start getting old. Isn't that awful? That was a good example, wasn't it? You wouldn't know, Chris. That's what happens.
Oh, I'm getting there.
Oh yeah, I know. Our co-housing community is such that we will be the first one in the Hamilton area, but what we really want to happen is that others will emulate our model, and we would help others create a co-housing community, and maybe those other models will be more economical, for lack of a better word. I'm not quite sure what situation is, of course, but people that say, oh, I could never afford that, then perhaps they mean because they are renting now, and I can see that if you don't have the down payment and you're on a fixed income, then it would be hard to buy into a co-housing community. But ours won't be the last one. I'm hoping that others will come forth and emulate our model and say, oh, that looks really cool. Well, maybe some philanthropists will just say, yeah, I'm going to build a 30-unit co-housing development, and I'm going to have them all rental units, for example, and that can happen. We don't know, but we're just doing ours at the moment because we can only do one thing at a time, and we're going to be moving into it, and whoever else we are able to. I mean, not just us. That's what we're wanting, is other people to join us for sure. But if those people think they can't afford it now, then I'm really hopeful that in the not too distant future there will be similar models coming up, different pay structures and ability to rent them out. And like Ellen said, the home sharing is an option as well. We just haven't got to that point yet. So it's an interesting question. It's a great question. I'm sorry I can't answer it with anything that's maybe what you wanted to hear, but.
Let me just say something about costs, because social housing providers in Hamilton are currently paying in the range of $250,000 to $350,000 to build a single unit of social housing, typically in a walk-up apartment. Indwell, for instance, builds 40-unit apartments. So that would be a unit that's probably 300 to 400 square feet. So the costs right now, anyway, and they're particularly rising very quickly, of construction are pretty high. Gives you some kind of ballpark of what you might be looking at.
Yeah. A
separate structure, a detached structure, of course, would be more expensive.
Excellent. That's exactly. And we're one of the things that we're doing on a monthly basis is we have a general meeting with our group and when it's relevant, which it is more so now because we're not quite as busy as we were in terms of the general meetings, we have speakers. And going forward, we are going to have Emma Cubitt come and speak with our group. And she's the architect, a local architect in Hamilton who built Indwell, I believe. She was the one, she and her husband, Graham. And she's very much into housing, like sort of affordable housing. And she lives in a co-housing community of sorts herself on Yonge Street, I think, in Hamilton. So that's something, if people are interested in joining us for that, then you could do so. But you can contact us at these email addresses. And if you're interested in, I would certainly recommend, at the very least, Hamilton Aging and Community, because you are then receiving a newsletter every month that has things like this course would be advertised in it, and anything else that's relevant to aging in Hamilton, basically.
Great. Yeah, there's just 2 other comments really that I'll just relay, and that brings us right about to time. So just someone had mentioned, in my research, I have heard from seniors that the type of housing they live in is really important for helping them maintain connection and receive support both before and during the pandemic, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And also, there's a piece on CBC Radio last weekend in their 30s who bought a house together in Toronto because they couldn't individually afford to buy. They had been sharing an apartment before then, so they knew that they all could get along. So if you want to respond to those or just leave them hanging.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's the co-ownership model, isn't it? The sharing a house, either one person buys it and the others rent part of it out, or whatever the case is. But I can see that sharing accommodation is just going to become necessary, not only economically, and especially for young people that can't afford to buy their own place, but just in terms of exactly what we're talking about, just having the connection and getting out of this whole idea that we need to be by ourselves to be successful, and you need to live in a single family house to be successful, because what would your friends think? In fact, Charles Durrett was saying that his dad would visit him at the co-housing community he lived in California, and his dad was always, well, Pashad, community living, I'm not doing that. Because he's an older guy, but he was always the first one in the common house and the last one to leave because he loved it. But he would deny that he loved it. Then after he said, "Oh, I would never live in a place like this." But meanwhile, he loved what he experienced while he was there. So I can just see this as really something in the future that's just going to keep going. But those are great comments. Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, we conquered some tech issues. We had a great presentation. That's really a fascinating and inspiring sort of way to live, it sounds like.
Yeah.
We appreciate your time, Judy, Ellen, Bill, and we will see you next week for same time, same place. I will make the link to everyone the day before, just as a reminder, and we'll see you next time.
Look forward to it. Thank you, everyone.